Hey guys, welcome to Y&R Daily Update YouTube channel. Today's topics. The Young and the Restless spoilers Thursday's full episodes August 7, 2025. There were moments in Genoa City when the air itself seemed to hum with tension, when the walls of the Newman Ranch bore silent witness to the unraveling of legacy, love, and loyalty, and this moment, this week was one of them. Audra had walked into the world of the Newmans, armed with ambition, strategy, and just enough arrogance to believe she could master it all. But what she hadn't anticipated was Victor's cold fury, the kind that didn't scream, but cut quietly, cleanly, and without remorse. The awakening would come fast, and without warning, and when it did, it would dismantle her illusions one by one, because while Victor may have once seen potential in Audra, now he saw betrayal, insubordination, and worst of all, a threat to the family order he had spent decades protecting. Her involvement with Kyle, her manipulation of situations, her subtle undermining of the Newman dynamic. It all added up to a reckoning she wasn't prepared for. And Victor, ruthless in his clarity, delivered that reckoning with precision. Audra had underestimated him, believing she could maneuver through his empire unchecked. But Victor didn't need noise to make war. He wielded silence like a scalpel. And when he summoned her into his office that morning, the look in his eyes told her everything. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. The verbal lashing that followed wasn't loud, but every word carried the weight of finality. He told her she had overstepped, that she had brought chaos into the family through ambition disguised as loyalty. He warned her that Newman Enterprises wasn't a playground for social climbers, nor a shelter for opportunists who got too comfortable. And as she stood there stunned into silence, the veil of power she once cloaked herself in began to dissolve. It was no longer about career moves. It was about survival. She was not irreplaceable. She was exposed. At the same time, Nikki was a storm barely contained. The memorial for Cole should have been a moment of reflection, of peace, a celebration, of a man who had once been a cornerstone in her life. But Victor, ever consumed by his distaste for the Abbotts and his relentless need to control the narrative, had turned it into something else, something cold, bitter, and humiliating. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Nikki had tried to reason with him behind closed doors, begged him to allow the family to grieve properly, but Victor dismissed her concerns as sentimentality. "I did what needed to be done," he said, his tone sharp with condescension. "Kyle has no right to interfere." But that wasn't the point. It had never been about Kyle. It was about Claire. Claire, who had finally found her place in the Newman family, who had loved and trusted Kyle despite the history, despite the legacy that threatened to define them. Nikki's voice cracked with fury as she reminded Victor that Claire was their blood and her love for Kyle was not a mistake or a rebellion. It was real and it deserved respect. Victor's response was cold, calculated. He claimed that the event had to remain private, free from distractions, and that Abbott interference had to be shut down. But Nikki, raw with grief and righteous anger, cut through his defenses. "Do you even hear yourself anymore?" she demanded. "You shut down every voice that challenges your view of the world. Why today of all days would you pick a fight with Kyle?" Her words didn't echo, they detonated. And for a moment, Victor had no answer, only the heavy silence of a man who believed too deeply in his own justifications. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Meanwhile, Claire stood shattered in her own way. She had arrived at the Newman Ranch hoping for warmth, maybe healing, but found herself caught in a crossfire of pride and control. Her grief for Cole, a man who had shown her rare compassion in a world of conditional love, was overshadowed by Victor's behavior. And Kyle, sweet, stubborn Kyle, was trying his best to hold her steady, even as his own footing faltered. He had always known the Newman name came with baggage, but he hadn't anticipated being treated like a trespasser by the very man who claimed to want unity. Claire's eyes were wet with fury as she recounted the way Victor had spoken of him, the way he had reduced their love to a problem to be solved rather than a bond to be honored. Kyle took her hands in his and swore he would fight for her, for them. But Claire no longer needed a savior. What she needed was space to grieve, to feel, and to remember Cole without the shadow of Victor's war poisoning every breath. Nikki, watching her granddaughter's anguish, couldn't stay silent. She found Victor once again, this time not as his wife, but as the only person left who could hold up a mirror to his actions. She told him the truth he didn't want to hear. That this wasn't about protecting the family. It was about controlling it. That the deaths of Cole and Chance should have reminded them all of life's fragility, of the pointlessness of old grudges. that this hatred for the Abbotts was no longer a strategy. It was a poison. "I'm begging you," she said, voicing. "Let it go. Let the Abbotts live their lives. Let Claire love who she wants. Let us mourn the people we lost with grace, not bitterness." But the question hung in the air like smoke. Could Victor do it? Could a man built on power, revenge, and dominance ever learn to let go? Elsewhere, Audra retreated into herself. The confrontation with Victor left her raw, uncertain of her place in Genoa City. Her usual armor of sarcasm and poise began to crack. She wondered whether she had truly lost everything. Whether Kyle's loyalty to Claire had finally erased any remnants of what they once shared. Her thoughts turned to damage control to salvage, but deep down she knew. The Newmans had closed ranks and she was now on the outside. Her name would never be written into the family's history, not as a partner, not as a savior, only as a lesson. And lessons in Victor's world were rarely forgiven. Kyle, despite the blows, remained a source of quiet strength for Claire. He knew they had a long road ahead. One filled with judgment, scrutiny, and doubt. But he had made his choice. Claire wasn't just a rebellion against Victor or a chapter in his war with Nikki. She was the woman he loved, and he would not let the weight of their families crush what they were trying to build. They would mourn Cole together, heal in spite of the tension, and find their own path forward. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. Back at the ranch, Victor stood alone for a moment, surrounded by the silence he once considered power. But now that silence felt heavier, almost accusatory. He had lost too many people, some to death, others to pride, and the weight of that truth pressed down harder than even he expected. Nikki's words lingered in his mind like an unfinished verdict. Let it go. Could he, or had he already gone too far? As night fell over Genoa City, the lights in the Newman estate dimmed, but the storm inside its walls was far from over. Audra plotted her next move. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Perhaps redemption. Perhaps revenge. Nikki watched over Claire and Kyle, wondering if love could survive the ruins of legacy. And Victor, the man who once stood unchallenged, now faced a reckoning not with enemies, but with the people who still dared to love him despite everything. In the days to come, grief would either unite them or destroy them further, and only time would reveal which. Would you like me to continue this with the aftermath, such as how Abby, Adam, or Summer react, or what moves Audra might make next against Claire or Nikki? I'm ready when you are. There was a strange kind of stillness at the observation deck that day. The kind that didn't bring peace, but only amplified the quiet turbulence simmering beneath the surface. Claire stood at the edge of the overlook, her arms folded, her eyes lost in the horizon, as Kyle approached carefully from behind. Unsure of how close he could be without pressing into a wound still raw. The wind tangled her hair as she turned slightly, not to greet him, but to brace herself for whatever conversation had to happen now. I'm not sad, she said without looking at him. I'm angry. That's all I feel right now. Kyle, ever the peacemaker, wanted to soothe her, to remind her that Victor was complicated, not cruel, and that things could still be repaired. But Claire wasn't searching for justification. She needed truth. She told Kyle that part of her believed Cole would be proud of her for standing up to Victor, for not letting her love for Kyle be twisted into some family liability. That defiance, that refusal to conform, would have made her father proud. But Kyle, hopeful and still clinging to the idea of reconciliation, gently suggested that she wouldn't stay angry with Victor forever. That time would soften the edges, that the bond, however bruised, would heal. Claire turned to him then, her eyes sharper than he expected. I'm not living in fear anymore, she said with quiet fire. Not of what he thinks. Not of what anyone thinks. Victor ruined something today, and I honestly don't know if it can be fixed. Her voice didn't tremble. It struck clean and deep, forcing Kyle to realize that this was no temporary fallout. This was a fracture in the very foundation she had been trying to rebuild. Still, he urged her not to rush toward decisions she couldn't take back. But Claire, haunted by the parallels in her life, dropped the cruelest comparison of all. Do you know who he reminded me of today? She asked bitterly. Jordan. The word fell like ash from her tongue, and Kyle's eyes widened. Claire hadn't uttered that name in months. I'm not going back to that, she said firmly. I'm not going to live under anyone's thumb. Not ever again. Before Kyle could respond, the moment shattered with the sound of approaching heels. Audra, always with impeccable timing, always knowing when to step in and poison whatever was healing. Claire stepped back immediately, her wall rising again, her energy shifting from anger to guarded withdrawal. She told Kyle to go to give her space, but Audra had other plans. With a sugary smile, she announced she had something for him, his phone charger. "You must have left it in my sleeper car," she said, letting the implication hang in the air like smoke. "When we were planning that presentation for Kane, you don't remember?" Kyle looked confused. No, he didn't remember. And that wasn't just because he was innocent. It was because Audra was a master manipulator, always rewriting facts to suit her narrative. She leaned in slightly, reminding him of a night with cocktails, soft lighting, and just enough ambiguity to make Claire wonder. "It's not mine," she added smoothly. "No one else has been in my room, so it has to be yours." Kyle, holding his ground, simply told her to keep it, refusing to play into whatever game she was setting up. But the damage, in its subtle form, had already begun. Later, alone again, Audrey UNC's phone vibrated with a message from the man she still hoped to impress, or at least manipulate to her advantage. Victor was summoning her to the ranch. She smiled to herself, thinking that perhaps she had just planted enough doubt in Claire's mind to make Kyle seem untrustworthy. When she arrived, Victor didn't offer pleasantries. He didn't ask questions. He issued judgment. She informed him somewhat smugly that she had sowed suspicion between Claire and Kyle. "We're sitting on a ticking time bomb," she said as if she were proud of the chaos she had introduced. But Victor was unmoved, cold, calculating, brutal. He reminded her that they had a deal, one that she had failed to uphold. Her manipulations had not yielded results fast enough. Her loyalties were thin, her actions too chaotic, and Victor, tired of excuses, gave her the one thing she feared most: withdrawal. "I'm pulling my support from your company," he said flatly. "It ends now." She froze, stunned, not by the words, but by their finality. Victor never bluffed, and when he said something was over, it was her business. Her entire facade of independence would collapse under the weight of his disapproval. And he knew it. Elsewhere, far from the corporate wars and emotional crossfires, Claire and Kyle retreated into something simpler, something ordinary. They visited a tack shop on the edge of town. The smell of leather and hay replacing the tension of family dinners and boardroom betrayals. It was a small rebellion, a way of reclaiming peace. Claire found herself drawn to the idea of starting fresh. Of building a life that wasn't defined by Newmans or Abbotts or scandals or history. She looked at Kyle with a rare softness and told him she was ready to move in, to build a home with him, not later, but now. Life was short. She had seen what it meant to waste time on grudges and expectations. Kyle didn't hesitate. He took her hand and said he wanted the same thing. When Victoria arrived, she didn't bring judgment or skepticism, only support. Claire told her mother everything. Her confrontation with Victor, her fear of becoming someone like Jordan, her desire to leave the past behind. And Victoria, for all her complications, understood. She nodded and said she supported her daughter fully. That she had earned the right to choose love, to choose peace, to choose herself. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. There were no conditions, no warnings, just a mother, for once, putting her daughter before her legacy. And as Claire leaned into Kyle, knowing the road ahead wouldn't be easy, she also knew that she wouldn't be walking it alone. Audra's whispers would fade. Victor's fury would simmer, and even Nikki's heartbreak would eventually be tempered by the joy of seeing someone in the family fight for happiness instead of power. Genoa City was always changing, always full of schemes. But for Claire and Kyle, in that brief moment, among saddles and sunlight, there was only truth and the fragile, beautiful possibility of a future free from the weight of the past. Let me know if you'd like this story to continue further. Perhaps, with Victor plotting new schemes, Audra seeking revenge, or Claire confronting the charger incident. I'm ready to expand any direction you'd like. The episode of The Young and the Restless, dated August 7, 2025. Is a tense and emotionally charged installment set in Genoa City, centering on the Newman family's internal conflicts and the fragile alliances surrounding them. The narrative revolves around several key characters. Victor Newman, the patriarch whose iron grip on his family and enterprise is challenged. Audra, an ambitious and manipulative figure whose attempts to navigate Newman power dynamics backfire. Nikki, Victor's wife, who battles grief and moral outrage. Claire and Kyle, a couple caught in the crossfire of family loyalties and legacy. And Victoria, Claire's supportive mother. Audra's machinations, especially her involvement with Kyle and subtle undermining of the Newman family, trigger Victor's cold and calculated wrath. He delivers a ruthless reprimand that exposes Audra's vulnerable position, making it clear she is no longer an insider but an expendable pawn. Meanwhile, Nikki is devastated by Victor's controlling interference in the memorial for Cole, a family member whose death should have united them in grief, but instead inflames old grudges, particularly against the Abbotts. Victor's insistence on shutting out the Abbotts and controlling the event creates tension with Nikki, who pleads for compassion and letting go of past hatred. Claire, caught between her grief for Cole and Victor's coldness, stands defiant with Kyle's steady support. She refuses to be intimidated or silenced by Victor's attempts to control her narrative and her love for Kyle. Symbolizing a break from the toxic legacy of the Newman family, Nikki confronts Victor, accusing him of prioritizing power and control over family unity and healing, as Audra retreats. Facing the loss of Victor's support, she attempts to sow discord between Claire and Kyle, but Victor's final withdrawal of backing leaves her isolated. Claire and Kyle seek solace in simple, ordinary moments away from the family drama, contemplating a future together free from the burdens of legacy and hostility. Claire's mother, Victoria, offers unconditional support, signaling a hopeful path ahead for Claire and Kyle, amid the ongoing family turmoil. The episode closes on a note of uncertainty and tension, with Victor facing an internal reckoning, Nikki holding on to hope for family healing, Audra plotting her next move, and Claire and Kyle striving to build a life defined by love rather than legacy. The looming question remains whether grief and conflict will ultimately unite or further divide. The Newman family highlights Victor delivers a ruthless, silent reprimand to Audra, cutting through her ambitions with cold precision. Nikki confronts Victor over his harsh control of Cole's memorial, pleading for compassion and family unity. Claire stands strong in her defiance against Victor's attempts to control her love for Kyle. Audra's manipulations backfire, leading Victor to withdraw his support and isolate her. Claire and Kyle seek peace away from family drama, embracing a future built on love and healing. Victoria, Claire's mother, offers unconditional support, prioritizing her daughter's happiness over family legacy. The episode ends with unresolved tension and the question of whether the Newman family's grief will unite or destroy them. Key insights: Victor's leadership style, ruthless control versus vulnerability. Victor Newman embodies the archetype of a patriarch, who rules through a calculated blend of silence and precision. His approach to conflict is less about loud confrontation and more about cold, surgical precision, which makes him uniquely intimidating. However, the episode reveals cracks in this armor, as Nikki's challenge and the accumulating losses begin to weigh on him. This suggests that even the most powerful figures can face internal reckonings when their methods alienate those closest to them. Victor's struggle with letting go of old grudges and control reflects a universal theme about the costs of power when it blinds one to emotional truths. Audra as a symbol of ambition and the cost of overreach. Audra's character arc in this episode is a cautionary tale about ambition that crosses into manipulation without a solid foundation of loyalty or respect. Her belief that she could maneuver unchecked through the Newman Empire underestimates the entrenched power structures. And Victor's ruthless nature, her ultimate isolation, and the withdrawal of Victor's support illustrate how fragile power can be when built on deceit and opportunism. Audra's fate serves as a reminder that in tightly knit family business empires, trust is paramount and betrayal is met with swift consequences. Nikki's role as the moral conscience and emotional anchor. Nikki's confrontation with Victor highlights her role as the emotional core of the Newman family, representing compassion, grief, and the desire for healing. Her plea for letting go of bitterness underscores the human need to reconcile and find peace amid tragedy. Nikki's perspective contrasts sharply with Victor's cold pragmatism, providing a necessary counterbalance. Her insistence that Claire's love for Kyle deserves respect challenges the entrenched prejudices within the family, pushing for progress and acceptance beyond legacy conflicts. Claire and Kyle, a new generation defying legacy constraints. Claire and Kyle's relationship symbolizes the challenge of breaking free from toxic family legacies. Their love, tested by judgment and hostility, is a beacon of hope and rebellion against the old guard's control. Claire's refusal to live under anyone's thumb and her comparison of Victor to her past oppressor Jordan indicate a deep desire for autonomy and healing. Their retreat to simple, ordinary experiences like visiting a tack shop is a metaphor for reclaiming normalcy and peace amid chaos. Their decision to build a future together signifies a turning point, where personal happiness takes precedence over family expectations. Victoria's unconditional support, A shift toward acceptance. Victoria's supportive stance toward Claire marks a significant shift from traditional legacy-driven family dynamics. By putting her daughter's happiness above social expectations or family reputation, Victoria models a new kind of parental love that prioritizes individual freedom and emotional well-being. This acceptance provides Claire and Kyle with crucial emotional backing and contrasts with Victor's rigid control, suggesting the possibility of change within the Newman family's often fraught relationships. The fragility of legacy and the burden of family history. The episode explores how legacy can be both a source of strength and a destructive burden. The weight of family history, grudges, and expectations traps many characters, limiting their freedom and fueling conflict. Victor's obsession with control and fear of losing power drives much of the tension, while Claire's and Kyle's desire to redefine their lives outside of that legacy creates friction. The episode poignantly shows how legacies can imprison individuals unless they consciously choose to break free, emphasizing the theme of generational change, grief as a catalyst for conflict and potential unity. The deaths of Cole and Chance serve as the emotional backdrop and catalyst for the unfolding drama. Grief exposes cracks in relationships and highlights unresolved tensions, but it also offers an opportunity for healing and reconciliation. The episode's unresolved ending leaves viewers questioning whether grief will ultimately divide the Newman family further or bring them closer. This dual potential reflects real-life complexities where tragedy can either deepen wounds or help mend them, making it a compelling thematic element of the storyline. Conclusion: this episode of The Young and the Restless masterfully weaves themes of power, legacy, love, grief, and rebellion through its complex characters and their intertwined relationships. Victor's cold dominion clashes with Nikki's compassion, Audra's ambition collides with harsh consequences, and Claire and Kyle's love challenges entrenched family norms. The emotional tension and moral dilemmas highlight the cost of control and the hope of breaking free from the past, setting the stage for ongoing drama and transformation within the Newman family. The episode's rich narrative invites viewers to reflect on the personal and familial struggles that define loyalty, identity, and the quest for peace.